I know exactly what I want to happen at defensive coordinator.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks and the number one sports podcast network out there. Thank you all so much for helping Locked On get to that point. On the offensive coordinator front, where should Oregon look? I'll talk about the defense coordinator and their number 5. The Ducks are in the playoff rankings. Thoughts there. This episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. I want Chris Hampton to be the defensive coordinator. Matt Zenitz of CBS Sports has reported that this is a strong possibility. It has not been confirmed as I am recording this show on Tuesday night, but the move makes all the sense in the world now that Tosh Lupoi has been announced as Cal's next head coach. Will Stein is going to Kentucky, and when that was first announced, there were all sorts of reports flying around that Chris Hampton was going to potentially go with Will Stein to Kentucky, which would make sense. Because I felt for a while coming into this year that Chris Hampton is going to be a Power 4 defensive coordinator in 2026. And it's just a matter of whether that's at Oregon or not. I don't know why Dan Lanning wouldn't make that offer. And if I were Chris Hampton and I wanted to be a head coach, well, Dan Lanning is in year 4, and he has churned out 3 Power 4 head coaches from his coordinator spots, 2 offensive and 1 defensive. So do you like your prospects better at Kentucky, or would you like him better at Oregon? Now, Dan Lanning still has to go, of course, and make the pitch. They have to discuss salary because Tosh Lupoi was a really highly paid defensive coordinator, and he also reportedly is going to stay through the playoff run with the Ducks, so concerns there can be alleviated. And, well, let's talk about that later on the show. But for Chris Hampton, I don't know that his experience gives him the ability to go in and ask for the same amount of money. I think Tosh Lupoi is getting around $2 million a year. I bet Hampton would be closer to like 1.6, maybe 1.7. And if year 1 goes well, then perhaps that would get bumped up. But a couple reasons why I'm really on board and why he's my number 1 target for Oregon on the defensive coordinator front. And I listed some guys yesterday on the show who, if it doesn't work out for some reason, and it seems like there would have to be a change, a pretty significant radical change for that to not be the case. If he winds up elsewhere, yeah, I'd take a look at Ryan Walters at Washington, Brian Ward at Arizona State, amongst a couple others. But I think that for Hampton, having already been a defensive coordinator and play caller previously, who's been on Oregon's staff for the last couple of years, so he's got familiarity not just with Dan Lanning and what he wants to do, but also the players, the roster retention component, because when coordinators go in the coaching portal, I guess you want to call it coaching carousel, a question always gets asked, and plenty of you have reached out to me about, well, what's the impact going to be on recruiting? And I'll dive into that more on tomorrow's show, but from a transfer portal aspect, I think Oregon's NIL situation, this is why it's important to be very committed and well-funded on that front. My word choice was not accidental there. I think that Oregon's going to be able to keep just about anybody that they want. Because if you are currently a starter at the University of Oregon, what is the upside of going to be a starter at Kentucky or Cal as they embark on rebuilds in their program? And I don't think Cal has as far to go to being a good team in the ACC as Kentucky does in the SEC. And there will certainly be Oregon players that go to both of these spots to follow Oregon's 2 current coordinators. I just don't know why, if you're somebody like Mateo Uyunglele, if you wanted to come back for your last season, would you go with Tosh Lupoi down to Cal for your final year? I mean, he's from the state, but I don't know why you would do that. I'm sure Oregon would love to take care of him on the NIL front and have him play his senior season. I also think he'd be very well suited to do that, but that's a different conversation. So I don't think that you're going to go from being a starter at Oregon to wanting to be a starter at Kentucky or Cal. I think you'll want to go from being a backup or a rotation guy at Oregon to being a starter at Kentucky or Cal. But overall, the roster retention component, it's not the highest on my list of reasons as to why I want Chris Hampton to be the defensive coordinator. It is a factor. It is definitely a factor. The other thing with him is that Tosh Lupoi has been first and foremost known as a great recruiter for a very long time. And I'm interested to see how it goes down at Cal, whether there are, some ramifications for the Ducks on the trail. And hey, normally they'd get this guy, but Tosh is there and gets him to go to Berkeley. Those will be some interesting offseason battles to track from time to time, I'm sure. But Chris Hampton has proven in his time in Eugene that he himself is an elite recruiter. Now, Tosh Lupoi has been coaching linebackers and defensive linemen for the last couple of years, and those are the sorts of players, particularly the defensive line, that he's recruited very well. Maybe Dan Lanning becomes more involved in those sorts of recruiting efforts, but Hampton just got the 24/7 Sports Recruiter of the Year. He has brought in defensive back talent, which is what he's been coaching for the last couple seasons, like Oregon as a program has literally never seen before. So you give me someone that has a respected profile as a coach in college football and is trending in being ready for this role anyway, who has a resume that indicates, yeah, he's ready for this sort of position, has been a defensive play caller before, and has been on staff successfully for the last couple of years and has proven he knows how to recruit at a high level. That checks a lot of boxes. And yeah, if he were to go elsewhere, Oregon could go out and make another good hire. Because another kind of overarching theme in my head as I've thought about all this stuff nonstop for the last 48 to 72 hours, in Dan Lanning we trust. Every time that Lanning has lost a good assistant or a good coordinator, the hire has been as good or better. And that doesn't mean that others haven't been good at their new destinations. Carlos McLaughlin is doing a good job with the Ohio State running backs. I really like Rashad Samples. And what he's doing with Oregon running backs, De'Aaron Hill and Jordan Davison, true freshman, man, absolute stuff. Lachlan was good. I'll take Rashad Samples. Ross Douglas so far, it's early. He's in his first year. But overall, I like what I'm seeing from this wide receiver room. Malik Benson, my guy Eric Scopel, put out a great tidbit earlier today as I'm recording the show and pointed out that at one point this season, Malik Benson had been kind of relegated down the depth chart for the Oregon receiver room. And he was Oregon's most important wide receiver through the month of November, which was their biggest month as they clinched a spot in the college football playoff for a second straight year. That's pretty awesome work. From Benson, yes, but you also have to credit his position coach for the work that goes into that week in and week out. So, yeah, Samples has been great on the offensive side, and Douglas has been good. I'm not automatically in the camp of, yeah, let's promote one of them to be the offensive coordinator. I don't think Lanning's going to do that. Just my guess. That's me guessing, not me reporting or saying anything based on knowledge, which I suppose is reporting, so that was repetitive. Anyway, I think that Chris Hampton's absolutely the right move, and I'd feel great about that going forward. So let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments below. Hit me up on Twitter at LockedOnDucks or at McLaughlin CFB. So that's where I want to go with the defense coordinator move. What about the offensive coordinator? Here's a name that has been thrown out there and I'm interested by, but I'm not as bullish as everybody else might be. First, this episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. NFL Sundays, they move fast. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment, and whoever Oregon winds up playing in the college football playoff. I certainly hope it's the ACC or Group of Five champ at Autzen Stadium. That'd be fun. But if it's not, whichever opponent it winds up being, you know the odds will be there on FanDuel. All the college football action you want, all the NFL action that you can want, everything is there. Live spreads are there in the NFL. You can make Sundays even more exciting. FanDuel's just got you covered for anything that you want to be a part of the action. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season as it continues for the college football postseason and the NFL regular season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. If you believe in Oregon, no matter who they're playing, hey, FanDuel's right there for you. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Oregon goes from having the most coaching staff continuity really in the entire country, especially when you consider Chris Hampton's profile and where his career has been trending, to now going into next year, you're going to have 2 brand new coordinators and might have to make another position coach hire depending on what Dan Lanning wants to do with the defensive staff. But, I mean, you've got Tony Tuioti there, of course, as the defensive line coach who's done a great job. And he and Tosh have recruited the defensive linemen really well over the last couple of years. And, hey, maybe he's somebody that Tosh wants to try and bring with him to Cal. I don't know that we're done hearing about potential Oregon staff moves. And, of course, Chris Hampton is reportedly someone Oregon's looking at very heavily, I think wisely, to be the defensive coordinator, but nothing's been done officially as I'm recording the show. So we'll just have to wait and see on that front. But for the offensive side of things, Will Stein going to Kentucky. A name that one of you wanted me to give an SSA on is Buster Faulkner. So Buster Faulkner is the offensive coordinator down at Georgia Tech. And I understand why his name would pop up. Frankly, in this coaching cycle, I think his name was one of the more under-discussed. I thought he might be a little bit more of a kid. There's still a couple jobs out there. Maybe he's going to be Penn State's next head coach because they don't have one as I'm recording this show. Man, their AD has botched that so hard. Got to feel for my guy Zach Sake over at Locked On Nittany Lions. Look at the spiral that Oregon sent Penn State into. It is truly, truly incredible because they fired Franklin early so that they could be ahead of the curve on coaching candidates, and they're not getting anybody. They didn't get Alex Golesh. He went to Auburn. John Sumrall went to Florida. Lane Kiffin, obviously, LSU. I don't think they were seriously looking there. Matt Rule, Kurt Signetti, Rhett Lashley, they've just continued. Bob Chesney's going to UCLA. Kalani Sitake's staying at BYU. They've messed that one up pretty good. But anyway, so Buster Faulkner as a potential offensive coordinator target for Oregon. Yeah, if Dan Lanning were to call him and say, do you want to go from Georgia Tech to Oregon? The answer would be yes. And Georgia Tech was a darn good team this year. I thought they would be. They went 9-3. They had a fun season that puttered out a little bit at the end because they couldn't play defense consistently. I'm not as bullish on the Buster Faulkner front. If you watch his offense, and look, this could be a Brent Key thing because Brent Key is a former, I believe, offensive lineman. He's Georgia Tech's head coach, and he places such a premium on running the football. Nothing about the Georgia Tech offense really fits with what Oregon's current personnel are. Now, a scenario in which it would make a bit more sense is if Dante Moore goes to the NFL, Austin Novosad goes with Will Stein to Kentucky, which I think is entirely possible, and Oregon is left with a quarterback battle because they don't find a high-profile transfer of Luke Moga and Achilles Smith Jr., and Luke Moga wins the battle. Okay, now Buster Faulkner's offense makes sense. So, for those who have not watched extensive amounts of Georgia Tech football this year, I'll give you a brief rundown. It is a very fun, though difficult offense to play in EA College Football 26, but it is predicated on a lot of quarterback run game. I don't mean a little. You know, Oregon showed some of it on Saturday against Washington. They had reads built into their run games because Washington's defense was really trying to take away the Oregon running backs, and that's probably a smart thing to do. They held Oregon to, I believe, their lowest rushing total of the season on Saturday. So credit them for that. But Georgia Tech runs their quarterback 15 to 20 times a game, sometimes more. Routinely, Haynes King, their quarterback this year, was their leading rusher, not just in yards, but in total carries. If Dante Moore is the quarterback next year, does anyone want to run Dante Moore 15 to 20 times a game? I'm good with running him 5 times a game. And now that you're in the college football playoff, you do whatever it takes to win a football game. You know, like Justin Herbert in the Rose Bowl. They wanted to keep him healthy all year, and then all of a sudden you're playing a great run defense. You need the numbers advantage. That I'm on board with. Okay. But throughout the course of an entire year, you're not going to do that. Now, could Buster Faulkner make some adjustments? Sure. But the whole foundation of his success at Georgia Tech is that he has a quarterback who is built and who is bred to be run 20 or more times every single game and go for 100 yards on the ground. If Georgia Tech had made the playoff this year, Haynes King would have been a finalist for the Heisman Trophy. He would have had an argument to win it because his numbers this year, I'm going to pull them up real quick. He has routinely been, obviously their leading passer, but their leading rusher game in and game out. So here's a recent look at his game log. He ran against Georgia, did not have a great day. 181 through the air, 39 on the ground. Against Pitt, 257 through the air, 76 on the ground on 20 carries. Against NC State, 408 yards passing, 103 rushing on 20 carries, 371 passing, and 53 yards rushing on 15 carries there against Boston College. Those are his last 4 games of the year. His carries per game go like this for the 2025 season: 19, 25, 8, 21, 14, 14, 12, 20, 15, 20, and 10. So if Buster Faulkner were to be the hire at Oregon, it doesn't mean they'd automatically have to run the quarterback that often. Maybe Luke Moga would have a little bit more of a role. We only saw him get a wildcat snap once this year, and I think he carried it for a few yards. I wish we'd seen that more. Anyway, a boy can dream. That's what I'm going to keep on doing. We saw it once, and that was something, but I'd be down to see it a little bit more. Anyway, I wouldn't want in a 2026 season in which Oregon is going to have as good of a chance, I believe, to win the national championship, so long as they handle the offseason correctly, as they've ever had before from a roster standpoint. There will be some serious needs. They'll need a few of the guys that could go to the NFL to come back. They won't need all of them. You'd like to have all of them. You know, Dylan Thieneman, Mateo, Kenyon Sadiq, those sorts of guys. Poncho at center as well. But there will be some adjustments roster-wise that will need to be made. But when you're going to have that type of a season, that much potential in a season, I don't know that I want to bring in a coordinator who's going to have to call an offense in a way that is different than what has made him successful. So yes, Haynes King has had some games at Georgia Tech this year where he's thrown for a lot of yards. But that's all predicated on the threat of a quarterback run opening things up on the other side. So stylistically, I don't know that it is a perfect fit. Are the numbers impressive? Yes. They have incredible balance. They use a lot of fly sweep and jet motion action, and Oregon certainly would have the personnel for that. Dyer Hill would be probably his favorite toy to play with in the Oregon offense. And he's been an offensive coordinator at several different spots at varying levels of competition: Murray State, Valdosta State, Arkansas State, Southern Miss. He was the quarterback's coach at Georgia and has been the Georgia Tech OC since 2023. So, yeah, on him being Oregon's offense coordinator, 3. I'm not hugely on board with it. It could be fun. It could be exciting in a lot of ways. I just don't know that I'd want to take that big of a chance, both with the potential for more quarterback runs, unless Luke Moga is the Oregon starting quarterback in 2026, in which case it'd be a perfect fit. Like, Luke Moga is his type of guy, but I don't think he and Dante Moore would fit perfectly. I think you'd have a mismatch there of style, similar to what you had last year at Alabama with Kalen DeBoer and Jalen Milroe. That was never a perfect fit. Jalen Milroe is Buster Faulkner's type of quarterback. Ty Simpson, not so much. But Ty Simpson fits really well with Alabama. Ty Simpson's having a great year. So, the Duck Abides sends this SSA in. This coaching carousel should make every fan appreciate Dan, the AD, and Phil Knight even more if that's possible. And a day is coming when Dan wears a cotton in a blizzard like the savage he is. Let's see. I'm trying to think of how high to make this take. You added cotton in a blizzard? Yeah, I think you would. Mama didn't raise no you-know-what. This is not the Pat McAfee show. So this coaching carousel should make every fan appreciate it. Yep, this is a 10. This is absolutely a 10 because Dan Lanning has not danced around questions. He has not given non-answers or anything. He's just come out and said, yeah, I'm not going anywhere. I'm right here. I'm right where I want to be, and I'm not leaving. And that's been really refreshing to watch everyone else go, huh? We don't know who our coach is going to be. And Oregon fans just go, oh, we do. So, yeah, I'm at a 10 on that one because I also think if Oregon plays in a blizzard, he will absolutely wear some cotton out there. Why not? Just the way he's. I loved his answer for that too. I want to be in the arena with our guys. That's such a great answer. Such a great answer. Now, if one thing or another happens, Oregon will not have to worry about playing in any type of blizzard come playoff time. All right, we detract from coaching carousel chatter to, what is it? Yes, actual football. So Oregon is up to number 5 in the college football playoff rankings. And I don't hate it. I don't love it either. So the reason is that the 4 teams in front of them are Texas Tech at 4, Georgia at 3, Indiana 2, Ohio State 1. I don't think Indiana and Ohio State, I don't know why that came out so weird. I don't know why Indiana or Ohio State are going to be lower than 2. Because if Indiana wins, then obviously they're number 1. But Ohio State losing to the number 2 team, is that dropping you 2 spots? Is Indiana losing to the number 1 team who they're supposed to lose to? Ohio State's favored by 5.5, according to our friends at FanDuel. Is that worthy of dropping 2 or 3 spots? Neither one of those teams is falling out of the top 4. So they're both going to have a high seed and get a bye. Now, Georgia plays Alabama. Alabama can absolutely win that game. I know because they won in Athens earlier this year. Now, beating a team twice is hard, and both have looked really good at times and really vulnerable at times. I think Georgia's been better overall this season. Alabama's had some high highs and some low lows. And, of course, Kalen DeBoer is the head coach in Tuscaloosa. So if Alabama wins that, let me start with the Big 12 championship. That game's being played on Saturday. Texas Tech's favored by almost 2 touchdowns against BYU, who they beat by over 20 in Lubbock earlier this year. Now, if they beat BYU again, the Cougars will unjustly be left out of the college football playoff. I think that's terrible, but that's just the way that it's going to be, which sucks for everybody involved, but oh well. The committee really wants to put Notre Dame in, and they really want to put Alabama in. That much is clear. So if BYU wins, then Oregon will move ahead of Texas Tech. They will move into the top 4, and they will not have a home game at Autzen Stadium. That is a guarantee. There is no scenario in which BYU wins and Oregon plays a home playoff game. Because to get a home playoff game, you have to be in that magical Goldilocks range of 5 through 8. Rather than trying to, get into the top 4, which is, again, one thing in college football that needs to be fixed amongst 74 other items. But if BYU wins, that'll 100% be the case. Because Ole Miss doesn't play this week. They're not going to jump over Oregon. Texas A&M doesn't play this week. They're not going to jump it. Those teams are just going to shift over. Like the Jerry Seinfeld joke about groomsmen at a wedding. They're all wearing the same thing in case the groom doesn't show up. Everyone slides right over and the ceremony continues. So if Georgia, however, loses to Alabama, now there's an interesting decision. Bama has a loss that is far worse than Oregon's, and they've got 2 of them. They lost at home to Oklahoma, who's a good team that's in the playoff field. I don't think Oklahoma's great, but they're good. They've earned it. Their defense is great. Their offense is just terrible. But their defense and special teams are really, really good. And if Alabama were to win the SEC championship, would they go ahead of Oklahoma, or would you have the same thing taking place? And that's very possible. The point spread is under a field goal in that one. I think Georgia's just a slight favorite there. So would Alabama, who in the committee's rankings is 9th from what we saw on Tuesday night, would they catapult from 9th all the way up to 4th and be behind a potential Big 12 champion Texas Tech and go ahead of an Oklahoma team. And look, they wouldn't get a home playoff game in this scenario, but they would be a higher seed. And remember, they fixed the seeding system from last year. So there is actually an advantage to being a higher seed. You'll play a lower ranked team. Now, I think it's kind of a wash once you get into the 5 to 8 range when you go Oregon, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, and maybe, Texas Tech or BYU in that hypothetical. I think BYU is probably the worst of the bunch, but are they good? Yes, and Texas Tech is really good. I think Texas Tech is really good. Anyway, so would the committee do that? That's a big jump. And they would go ahead of Oklahoma, who beat them in Tuscaloosa. So I think if either one of those games go in that direction where the lower seeded team wins, then Oregon is going to get a bye, and they will have over a month between the time they played their last football game and their first college football playoff game. And it would not be at Autzen Stadium. It would most likely be in Miami. So this weekend, I am 100%, without question, rooting for Texas Tech and Georgia to ensure that Oregon stays in the number 5 slot. I do not want them anywhere else. They will play either the ACC champion, which would be Virginia, because if Duke wins, the ACC just won't get a team in the playoff, which is crazy, but that's the way it'll go. Or they will play a group of 5 champion, either James Madison, who will win the Sun Belt, and the winner of North Texas and Tulane, who play on Friday. The 5 spot is a great one to be in. I am 100% all about it. And I want no part of waiting until January 1st or December 31st for Oregon to play their next game. I'm glad they have a break so that they can get healthy. But I think there is a line of, a month, over a month between games is a really long time. And then you'd have to go all the way across the country to play a team that probably wouldn't have to travel quite as far. So go Texas Tech and go Georgia. And again, if the SEC championship sees Bama win, not a guarantee, just a possibility that Oregon would slide up. Maybe Bama would move up and get a bye. Maybe. Don't know for sure. But yeah, I'd like Oregon to just stay in the 5 spot. That'd be, I think, the best outcome there. Okay, SSA. If Oregon is 100% healthy, they're the best team in the country and national title favorites. No. This is a 1. And it's not that I don't think they could go win the national championship, because as good as Ohio State is, I don't think anybody's untouchable or unbeatable in college football. And Indiana's number 2 team in the country, and I know that Oregon's capable of beating them. They just happened to not earlier this season at Autzen Stadium. But no, I would not say Oregon is at all the title favorite. It's Ohio State, and then it's Indiana, and then it's, I don't know, whoever's hot. But those 2 teams look better than everybody else. And do I think Oregon could beat them on a good day? Yes. Would it be incredibly difficult? Of course. Because they are very good programs with a lot of NFL guys and some really good coaching staffs. But no, I don't think Oregon is getting healthy away, a stretch of getting healthy away from being the national title favorite. So I'll end with the fact that I got Tuesday trivia right. That was one of the deepest polls I've ever had. 2000 Holiday Bowl against Texas. Keenan, Howery threw the touchdown to Joey Harrington. I don't even know where I pulled that from. The Howery part, I was kind of remembering back to the Matt Kearney song. And then all of a sudden, I was just like, I think I've heard Keenan Howery before. I don't even know where. I don't even know when. I don't even know from whom. I just know that I pulled that one out, and that is one of the better polls I've had. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. Until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.